As we continue with our Voices of the Future debate segment on the Weekend Report, where we give a platform to future political leaders as we unpack some of the challenges they face and their perspective of the current political landscape. Well, last week we wrapped up a series of youth-led discussions, and this week, for the next few weeks in the lead up to the May 29 poll, will feature prospective leaders from different groups for robust discussions as we reimagine a new South Africa. And this week, we speak to women in politics and explore the challenges, the successes, and the future of women in the country's political landscape. In today's Future Voices Roundtable debate, I'm joined by women who are not asking for permission, but taking the lead, breaking barriers and transforming the face of politics. My guests are independent candidate. She's not new in the space, as she's previously been a member of the ANC and COPE, Anele Mda, as well as newcomers to the playing field, BOSA Deputy Leader Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster and Tiisetso Skhosana, the campaign manager for Xiluva in Gauteng. Ladies, welcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us, Masechaba.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, to kickstart this conversation, Anele, as an independent candidate, you launched your manifesto last week, Thursday, where you strongly indicated your priority around minority groups, in particular people living with disabilities, but also finding ways to incorporate them into our economy. And I just want to know from you, does the justice system in South Africa see color? More specifically, does it favor the haves over the have-nots? And how do we ensure equality within the broader landscape of our country?
Thank you, Masechaba. Indeed, when I unveiled my manifesto at the Constitutional Court, I highlighted one of the priorities being that of putting people who living with disabilities as a priority area, because I feel that there is so much that remains with that group or with that sector that is marginalization and different level of segregation and also discrimination against them. But to your question that says, does justice see color? It doesn't just only see color, it also sees the underprivileged and previously marginalized groupings that continue to be subjected even to this very day into an expensive way of accessing justice. And people living with disabilities endure, and they are at the center of that suffering. And I believe that so much requires a lot of, reimagining in the space that relates to justice, because one of the things that our Constitution does not only provide is access to law and justice for all. But when you practicalize that and put it into a clear crystallization, you find that it is an extreme expensive sport for people who do not have the resources. And I think we do need to come very clear about how do we ensure that the access to law, to justice for all gets to be realized. And
we'll expand on that in just a second, but I want to come to you, Tiisetso. Your party recently celebrated its one-year anniversary. Yes. And as its campaign manager, do you think that South Africa is ready to be led by an independent candidate?
Look, South Africa has been going through a lot of challenges, and we have seen how the landscape in politics have changed for the past 30 years. We are in a democratic institution and democratic country. We as Xiluva support women. We as Xiluva support growth and independency. And as a party which is new and which wants to see change in the political landscape of South Africa, we are embracing anyone that is for change in South Africa, particularly women. As seeing an independent leader in politics and being a woman is something that might be or might have been a taboo 30 years ago. But then our issues as women, as Xiluva, we believe that women issues should be put on the table. When we started Xiluva, one of the things that the president had said was the importance of getting single mothers for us to be able to impart the knowledge, the well-being and the development, particularly sustainable development in South Africa for our families. And what better way for it to be done by a woman? Now you look into where we come from. Men have failed us as a country. And seeing a black sister who's a politician and an independent candidate, is for us to improve more of our women to be independent. And at Xiluva, we don't see anything wrong with an independent candidate because the landscape is broad and it needs to be broadened and stop marginalizing women because we've been marginalized for so many years. So we don't see a challenge in that.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Nobuntu, you've raised your hand for a premier position in Gauteng. And considering that we've been introduced to crime prevention wardens to tackle the issues of crime, particularly in the province, do you think that was a good move? And if so, how are you going to deal with the issue of crime in Gauteng?
So I think the issue of crime in Gauteng is one of the most critical issues because this is what should be the economic hub of the country. And the reality is that if you don't have safe communities, you can't actually build an economy. The issue of crime wardens is one that is potentially something that could have worked. However, given that these people are not necessarily trained, these are not people who actually have the right authority to even be able to implement some of the safety that we need to be able to see in communities. That's what holds the challenge. The process through which this was done, and the reality is that it was leading up to elections, and we know that part of it is electioneering. So the process and the preparation was not adequate to actually address the real issue of crime. As Bulbane say, what we have tabled is a plan that first of all decentralizes and gives power to local authorities, to local safety enforcement and law enforcement authorities to be able to make a difference in communities. So you have to be able to give power locally, you have to be able to work with communities and work with the private sector to be able to address the issues of crime in this country. While we have the crime wardens that are here, we're in a situation where they legitimately don't have the authority to even arrest people. And so people will get away with the crimes and we will not see a reduction in crime as we need to in order to be able to see change in that aspect.
I'd like to know where BOSA stands when it comes to coalitions, because you've spoken about the government in the sense that it's not only got broken systems, but it's broken people. Would you be willing to work with this government?
So when it comes to coalition, we're willing to work with people with whom we share the same values as a start, and make sure that we have the same kind of principles. And when you look at the current government, I wouldn't say that we hold the same principles as them. That's the first. The second is to work with parties that are gathering and coalescing around the table, not for positions, not for proximity to the purses, but on the basis of what they have strength in as it pertains to policy, as it pertains to skill, and us saying, well, here's where we feel we are strong. Here's where our policy is strongest. Here's where we have the greatest experience and skill in the candidates that we have. So let us focus on that. We have heard recently a party that said they would go into coalition with the governing party on the basis that their deputy president, and this is the EFF, gets a position as finance minister. And the reality is that it can't be about that. It can't be about us negotiating for positions. You have to put South Africans first, and you have to be talking about how are you going to deliver best for South Africans and how are you going to work together to be able to deliver best for South Africans.
Now, Anele, with women being the majority of the population and the majority of voters, quite frankly, how do we entrench the female agenda within the political landscape?
First of all, Masechaba, women in politics need to begin to understand that leadership is within each and every one of us. And we are not women who must look at ourselves as though our arrival in the political space and our active role in the political landscape should be looked at as an agenda that will be set by our fellow counterparts who are male in the space. But we need to really rise up to the occasion and taking leadership. When we are taking leadership, we need to possess a very deepened progressive approach of things, especially understanding that whenever a woman rises, a woman never rises for a struggle or for a cause that is about themselves. They always rise for a cause and a struggle that is about an entire universal beneficiation of the community. And these are some of the things that we need to start elevating more about the women leadership that we are. But also in politics, you might have seen that there has been an elevation of those women who are imposter boys, voice to celebrate the chauvinists that exist in the political landscape. And that has happened at the expense of the progressive voices that we need to hear in our society and be elevated. I mean, one of the persons that did something that I believe was groundbreaking in this country is Nana Ngobese. Nana went as far as establishing a women forward organization. What did South Africa do? It spat on the face of that woman. It did everything that was to vilify her because she was seen as though you are big-headed, you are thinking so much of yourself. And that's the attitude that women of South Africa need to break down to its core and ensure that we must be unapologetic about our rise as women. Look at the scars of Umakhuluwini Madikizela. What did she do? Who are the people that vilified her? That woman carried a whole entire black nation struggle during the apartheid. Even when political parties were burned, she kept ensuring that the socialization of the people of South Africa, the voices of women will be heard. But what happened after that?
And you mentioned Nana. We had actually extended an invitation to her, but unfortunately she could not join us today.
So
I know, I can imagine, right?
So
Tiisetso, coming to you, your party stands for Ubuntu as a top priority. How do you think Ubuntu can transform the landscape of South Africa? And in what ways?
Politically, we have lost Ubuntu. And I'll explain why. Any institution that starts stealing from the government purse has lost the integrity and the dignity. Ubuntu is about us as people taking care of each other. We are saying as Xiluva, umuntu ngabantu ngesizwe. Now, when you are in government, for example, like in social development, and you see a lot of corruption happening, by virtue of you misusing the children's grants or the pension grants, you have lost the touch of Ubuntu. For us, Ubuntu doesn't in any way come closer to corruption, to stealing. You say a child has been raised by a village. Hence, you see us talking about bringing the monarch back as Xiluva when we get into power. Ubuntu comes into politics to teach us the morals of respecting our citizens. Ubuntu comes into politics to impart to the leaders of society that you are being put into that position because of the voters, because the massive numbers of South Africans on the ground, they voted for you. We entrust you with our well-being. We entrust you with our education. We entrust you with the government at large. Now, when you start spending a cent which was meant for textbooks and not use that money for a specific cause, you have lost Ubuntu.
All right, we'll expand on that when we come back. And I could see there, Nobuntu, I could almost feel your thought process, especially when Tiisetso spoke about bringing back the monarch. And I'd like to know what your views are on this matter when we come back. Women in politics is the discussion for this week. I am still joined by independent candidate Anele Mda, BOSA deputy leader Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, and Tiisetso Skhosana, the campaign manager for Xiluva in Gauteng. So, ladies, we were just in conversation, and Tiisetso, you had mentioned the return of the monarch as one of your key priority areas. And I wanted to know from you, Nobuntu, where you stand as BOSA within this regard.
So the place of traditional leadership is very important, particularly in this country. I think it's important as a moral authority, and I think that it's important in preserving some of the traditions and cultures that we have as a country. But what's equally important, particularly in a democratic country, is the will of the people. I mean, as BOSA, particularly what we are anchored on, and actually what we established upon when we founded the party, is making sure that even our own candidates and our leaders are chosen by communities. So we went and we developed a model that actually didn't exist in South Africa before we launched BOSA, which says communities must actually choose their own leaders that become candidates for parliament and for legislatures. And that is because it is important that power is back in the hands of the people. It's important that people are able to say, these are our leaders and we've chosen them. And so for us, we think that traditional leadership is important, but that ultimately governance and the leaders who lead in the country must be chosen by the people. And even the policies that are entrenched in this country must actually put power back in the hands of the people, which is what actually we've done as BOSA, is to table policies that say, how do we get economic power back into your hands? How do we give you power back in how you choose the education for your children? And all sorts of other sectors and facets of governance.
All right. Anele, as an independent candidate, how do you respond to Nobuntu's sentiments, especially with regards to where they stand as a party?
I actually think that there is a deliberate move to ensure that traditional leadership in South Africa perishes. And I'm saying it's pushed towards being made to perish because they are either compelled to be co-opted to party political policies or agendas. There is no recognition of this independent institution of original local leadership, because if you were to recognize fully that traditional leadership role in South Africa is important, you would have find a way of integrating them into the local government. Because what is local government? Local government is about ensuring that there is administrative execution of policies that are about the people at the lower level of the sphere of the country, right? Why would you then have local traditional leaders outside of the mainstream of governing the people that are at their own managerial district or their own jurisdiction? That on its own tells you that there is a deliberate move that seeks to look at the NDP. What does it say when you read it? What does it say about traditional leadership? There's a move to ensure that they are slowly driven towards periphery. And at the end of the day, you see by how most of the traditional leaders are jostling in running into holding positions in political parties, because they are trying to put themselves safe, but also to escape what is an inevitability. I think what Nobuntu is saying about that but is too big for me and is noticeable. And it says that whilst they may recognize the role of traditional leaders, they are also in their advancement of what they say must be the application of the democratization of the process and how the recognition of traditional leaders happen. It then comes to nullify the role that they say they recognize of the traditional leaders. I believe traditional leaders should not be either co-opted into government. They must be recognized as an independent statue in South Africa, which must be given all the powers that it requires, so that we do not take from the authority that they already possess, because they don't need new authority. They already possess authority. You just simply need to recognize the stature that they are, and after you have done that, you are able to allow them space to do their work without this conflicting interference that happens.
All right, Tiisetso, South Africa has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence and femicide in the world, quite frankly. So how does Xiluva intend to deal with the scourge?
In every situation, it's important not to look at the surface point of view. It's quite important to look at underlying factors. In South Africa, the issue of gender-based violence is mostly men being abused and particularly women being abused. We need to understand as a political party what causes that. And more than anything, we need to understand that you don't just fall prey to that at a particular age. It starts with the background and the home that you were raised on. It's important that we need to teach our boy child from the tender age that respecting your sibling in the house, respecting your classmate at the level of kindergarten is very important. We have this narrative that a boy child can do or say anything from an early age. But what we don't see as society is that we are building and nurturing a seed. Then when it grows, the level of respect to a woman, to a fellow colleague, and also at the highest level, because if we look at it, gender-based violence is not only physical, it's also happening emotionally in workplace. It happens in politics. Hence, as women, we have stand and said, enough is enough. We as Xiluva believe that we need to address the underlying issues. We need to bring experts from an early age of childhood development. We need to put systems in place whereby we can deal with the challenges children face. It cannot be correct that a child who grew up in a family whereby a father beats their mother every day will be going to
is
school.
Expected to function normally without
exactly,
the correct support.
Because if you look at it, it affects their performance at school.
And their development and their cognitive function.
The cognitive function
We'll
of
come back to this to explore it a little bit further. But now, let's have a look now at the composition of leadership structures within Parliament, and particularly the prioritization of representation of women in particular. Where does it begin within parties and within communities, Nobuntu?
So maybe let me first start here to say that we have one of the highest representations of women in Parliament. We have 47, 48% of women representation in Parliament. But I always want to say that means nothing if it does not impact how we see life transform for women in life. If women economically are not transformed, their lives are not transformed economically, societally, culturally, then that representation is null and void. What is important in political parties, first of all, so when we founded Build One South Africa, Most of My Money in 2022, as we went around the different provinces and the countries, the women would always come to me and say, when are we starting our women's league? We want a women's league, we want a women's league. And I actually pushed back on that because the reality is that you've seen in other parties where the women's league becomes the space where women, it's the only space where they're leading. It's the only space, and it's almost said, you know, you can go lead in the women's league, and then the mainstream of the party is led by men. And what I had wanted to see is women leading in the party, women leading in the structures in the party. So it's important to make sure that parties are intentional about that. It's important to make sure that there is space and an enabling environment for women to lead. And so in our party, you know, we've done what we can, I've done what I can to make sure that women can lead, and we've seen that most of our party structures are led by women, provincially, in regions, etc.
All right, I'd like to bring Anele in here. You are the space. I mean, you are a female independent candidate. What challenges do you face as a woman in this political sphere?
I think one of the things that I can express that I have not allowed it to come and cloud who I am is the cyberbullying of people who come and think that they need to have their opinions of whether it is opportune for me to stand and as an independent candidate, and whether I bring any impeccably relative and also substantial contribution that is not out there in the political landscape. And some of those challenges have emanated from the fact that our society is very patriarchal, and anything that is that sees a woman rising must be questioned. And I go as far as meeting interviews where people, a presenter or an anchor or a journalist will ask me, do you think South Africa is ready to see a woman independent rising in any strategic center of power? And for me to still be facing such questions from even as far as media people who do not understand that the world never questions a male when they rise as a leader, but the world is going to question a woman when a woman rises, because
this is true. But how do you think we deal with this patriarchy, especially because it has been said by women that women are actually the enforcers of patriarchy?
Look, one of the things that we must never fall trap of, Masechaba, is the one of being boxed by a certain narrative that seeks to ensure that as women we continue being entangled in conflicting things that do not advance our own cause. Before we allow a narrative that says we are the enemies of one another, we must see the very same people who say so not using women's strength to advance their own struggles. Because tell me now, show me a struggle or a cause that has ever been attained without the massive muscle of women. No struggle has ever been won the world over that has not been backed by women. So before we entertain and want to make such narratives that are very stereotypical, that are very backwards, and that smack of cowardice, because people who say that are cowards who cannot be able to hold their own spaces of their own struggles. They will forever drag women to use them, to put them at the front as their proxies, because they do not have the necessary prowess to stand and face their own challenges, deal with them. They will always front women because they know the strength of a woman is unbreakable. So I'm saying The patriarchy that we face in South Africa will not go away on its own, because there is no agenda that a man has that is about a woman. Women leaders are one who see society and who structure women leaders and leaders in society generally.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Ladies, before I let you go, you will have 30 seconds each to tell us why South Africa should vote for your party or why they should vote for you. So starting with you, Nobuntu, why should people vote BOSA?
BOSA is here to put a job in every home. We've been around the country everywhere, and the biggest challenge in this country is about jobs and not having jobs. We are committed to putting a job in every home. We're committed to making sure that people have power, particularly economic power, back in their hands to make a difference in the lives of themselves, their families, and their communities.
Thank you very much. Tiisetso, why should people vote Xiluva?
We are a new kid on the block, and we are tired of what has been happening in the landscape, political landscape. Xiluva, we are here to bring back what is us. Like we said, we want to bring the monarchy back to be part of rebuilding South Africa, because they're the custodians of our people in their places, in their villages and remote areas. Voting Xiluva is also looking into developing young people. We are saying we are a party living by example.
30 seconds is up. Thank you so much. All right, Anele, why should people vote for you?
I'm a leader anchored on integrity, honesty, transparency, and accountability. My going to Parliament will be a representation of the marginalized voices that are outside of the decision-making stratas, and I will bring them there to make sure that their voices are heard, they are seen, and their challenges are addressed. When people go to the ballot on the 29th, they must vote for me for a fresh perspective, a vibrant and energetic voice, but also accountability in public office.
Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you for your time and all of the best.
Thank you.
Thank you
right.
so much, Masechaba. We
Thank you,
truly
Masechaba.
appreciate you.